Hello everyone, I'm Crystal Leonti. I'm with IBM Research, and this presentation will be about regulations in Wikidata, specifically for the case of PFAS-related regulations. Recently, IBM launched the Safer Materials Advisor, an AI-powered app aiming to help corporations proactively identify and then phase out harmful substances. One key category of materials of concern is PFAS, which stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, more commonly referred to as forever chemicals. In order to help companies identify and replace hazardous chemicals like PFAS, it is essential that PFAS regulations are well organized and accessible, something Wikidata can help enable. The magnitude of the PFAS-related issues is gigantic, as PFAS are found in thousands of consumer and industrial products. They are also persistent in the environment and the human body for hundreds of years. They are bioaccumulative and toxic. In fact, we probably all have measurable amounts of PFAS in our bloodstream right now. Therefore, it isn't surprising to see that the class definitions of PFAS are broadening, the regulations are multiplying, and overall the regulatory scrutiny is intensifying globally as governments work to limit exposure and ensure public safety. Keeping in mind that there are tens of thousands of PFAS compounds and several different PFAS definitions that vary geographically, the subsequent PFAS regulations are therefore numerous, and they also vary in scope. Some aim at lowering PFAS contaminants, some aim at better keeping track of PFAS, and some outright ban the use of PFAS. In addition, the rules can be confusing as sometimes the manufacturing itself is banned, sometimes the selling is banned, and there's also the notion of geography that further complicates everything, as regulations vary by country, state, or even region. Policymakers, such as the EPA in the US or ECHA in Europe, do publish regulations on their respective websites, but there is no centralized or harmonized system for tracking them, let alone one that supports automated interpretation. And that's where we saw potential in Wikidata, as a structured, open knowledge base that could help organize and connect legal information. In a nutshell, our idea was to make use of the existing Wikidata entries in the legal domain through our KIF framework. KIF is an open source Wikidata-based knowledge integration framework developed by IBM Research that captures heterogeneous knowledge sources, such as Wikidata itself, but also PubChem or CIRCA, which is a patent database with chemically annotated data, using Wikidata's data model as a unifying structure. Using KIF, we can query the different sources as if they were Wikidata and obtain Wikidata-like statements as a response. Whenever possible, KIF maps the vocabulary used by the sources into the vocabulary of Wikidata, and this has worked well for basing properties of chemical compounds, and so we were hoping to follow the same strategy to describe their regulatory status using data from the EPA or ECHA databases. But unfortunately, this has proven challenging, as Wikidata currently lacks a rich vocabulary for describing in detail the content of regulations, bills, laws, etc. Upon exploring Wikidata, it became apparent that, although the potential is definitely there, the current coverage for legal information is very fragmented and inconsistent. For example, we only found a handful of wiki projects focusing on legal data, and for each and every one of them, the number of participants was really low. Next, we focused on the regulations entry in Wikidata, and we only found 125 instances of this entry. When digging a little deeper, we realized that almost 60% of those instances did not have a country associated with them, probably meaning that they're a work in progress and they're not ready to be utilized yet. Last but not least, if we look at the number of regulations per country, we can see that even for major nations, the count is really low, the highest being only 7 for the US. Finally, when we look at other legal-related entries such as statute, legislation, or law, we see through their definitions that they have a lot in common, so the distinctions between them is really blurred, and that in turn can cause inconsistent classifications. Moving on to properties related to law and justice, we found a decent number, about 137 of them, but we also noticed that they were used quite inconsistently, which reduces their effectiveness to return relevant information from structured queries. To conclude, Wikidata offers great potential for tracking regulations, whether it be for PFAS or for other applications, thanks to all of the great characteristics that defines it. It's open and collaborative, it has structured, interlinked, and queryable data. And last but not least, KIF offers a framework that can leverage the legal data from Wikidata almost instantly. However, currently we're missing out on all this because, as discussed, the current coverage is pretty inconsistent and incomplete across many entries related to the legal domain. To finish, here are some community steps that we could suggest to improve the regulatory coverage of Wikidata. First and foremost, we need to clarify modeling standards and define better when and how to use items and relevant properties. To help with this, entity schemas could be used to enforce and check data quality. When standards are in place, statements can be populated, ideally with data from trusted sources. And we can also think of launching focused initiatives by engaging, either through existing wiki projects or by starting new ones, specifically for PFAS, for example. And given that the PFAS chemicals market is worth billions of dollars, as PFAS are present literally everywhere around us, the potential impact of a coordinated community effort to improve Wikidata's legal data coverage could be enormous. Thanks for listening.